This video took a minute to make, mostly because I was playing Peak and not working on the video. Besides that, we're here now, and I wanted to make a video as an overview that goes over what I'd change if I wanted to level this build again from a league start perspective. Promises in my previous video, took me a second to make it. It is what it is. This video will serve as a reference point for the next league when I go to league start this again. And assuming no changes happen that are going to substantially make the early game unplayable or something like that, which, I mean, let's be honest, probably something will happen. This is probably going to be like my POB that I'm going to try and follow. My axe leveling has not really changed at all in comparison to the last POB that I had made for my actual league start, right? I'm still going to be playing with kinetic bolt until level 12 and then swapping over to kinetic fusillade with volley. I'm also going to use kinetic fusillade totems, right? I'm still going to be trying to take these points right here in order to get a good amount of reduced duration for the kinetic fusillade so that it feels a bit more smooth. Because of the changes that happen this league, kinetic fusillade does not need a whole lot of skill effect duration reduction. So you can really just get a bunch of damage instead. I wanted to get this on the tree because it just smooths it out a little bit, but you honestly probably don't even need to take this because your attack speed is probably not going to even match this anyway. I was matching the attack speed by like act 8 and I had a very fast attack speed wand. Because of the changes, it's a lot more smooth. So I played this with kinetic fusillade totems after I got to the point where I was able to use them. I was also self-attacking using kinetic fusillade, mostly because the damage was just really strong in the early game. By the time I got to around, I believe, maps is when I stopped actually self-casting kinetic fusillade and I just used the totems instead. Because of how strong the damage was, I was probably able to swap to kinetic fusillade totems only by the time I was even in act like 8. I used them to get to maps with 0 issues last time. Probably just gonna end up doing the same thing unless they nerf it again. I was even playing with my friend who was doing maybe like 20% of the damage while we were leveling together, and I was basically carrying the both of us with 2-player HP. So kinetic fusillade totems do great damage while leveling. I'm not going to change that. They're really comfortable for me. They're really smooth. That's just what I prefer. Obviously, you're able to do whatever you want, but I found kinetic fusillade totems to be pretty comfy. I know that Captain Lance has his own version where he levels with RF and uses Incinerate or something like that, and that's really comfy. Again, it's up to you. I'm doing this way for my version because I'm going to be using auras anyway, so not really going to be stacking a whole lot of life as I get further and further into the end game, so that thing just won't matter for me that much, so I'm just not going to even care about that. All that being said, as far as the notes section goes, not a whole lot has really changed here. I did obviously change the notes here to be focused more on destructive link. I'm not going to have the flame link in here that anymore, right? Because I'm just not going to be focused on using flame link. I'm using auras instead. So the whole idea is instead that you're getting a bunch of flat damage from the auras. This was playable in the early game for me, like absolutely playable. And I also have the POB that kind of exemplifies that. Felt very smooth to me. Obviously, you're free to change any of this however you want. This is just what I preferred to do. As far as that goes, I'm also changing this ascendancy leveling order, so noble blood into oath of fealty. Right now that we have this in the POB, we can actually see this now. I'm probably going to come down here and get noble blood first because I think noble blood obviously is the only choice you can even get anyway, unless they change this in the future, right? Going into my cruel lab, I'm going to be coming over here to oath of fealty, mostly because it's just another link that you can give to a mercenary. Maybe this matters, maybe this really doesn't. It might even be better for me to just grab legendary amulets and then legendary arms and like give them a unique item or something like that, right? Marlene's fallacy would be my first choice to give to them, right? And they just kind of exist on their own. My KF totems were doing just fine without me even linking to them, so I'm honestly even thinking just running with that works, right? Don't even worry about giving them anything, any links until you do Merc Lab, right? So Merc Lab, around this point, you would most likely have this done. Obviously, this is when I prefer to have amulets and legendary arms because we can actually give our Merc destructive link without it like constantly needing to be refreshed. And this makes it pretty comfortable, giving them a boatload of crit in the form of crit from your weapon. At level 40, I think you can start using Tripanon, and that's a amazing item to give to your mercenaries. They're basically going to have a 100% chance to crit, and if it's a strong mercenary, it will just hyper carry you with 0 issues. With that being said, Later on, I'd prefer to have Allgaier. Allgaier with Unjust Harmony does really, really well. Allgaier has a lot of base crit. Tesalio Sign is a pretty good leveling unique. This basically made me go from Axe into maps with zero issues at all. It was so smooth and so easy. This is like all stuff that just mostly for buffing your Merc, right? Because again, we're using Destructive Link, and this is for the crit setup, this is for Flask, this is for auras, right? That's basically it. Tesalio Sign was mostly for myself. As far as the mercenaries I'm going to be looking for, it's going to be either a combatant or a bow merc. Most likely a many shot will still be the best thing for me to look for, right? That's basically the main thing I kind of like changed here, just, and also showed off like some of the unique items I'd want to grab in the early game for those mercenaries. I'd want to run double the taming. When I say mid game after Uber Lab, I really do mid game because tamers are probably going to be expensive on like day 1, day 2. My main focus is going to be to get a combatant though and run a replica abysses, right? And then obviously eventually running taming for when I get my Uber Lab done, because in Uber Lab wanting to get helmets and rings, so that would be kind of what I'm hoping for. I didn't change anything for the anime garden here. I did add 2 other mercs that I think are pretty good. I removed a couple ones I'm not really even considering for the build. I haven't really tested them. I'm probably not going to, because these are just the ones I know work really well. In general, Flame Hand is pretty good. It's if you cannot find a very good attack merc. Storm Hand is also pretty good if you cannot find a really good attack merc, right? Something with Rolling Magma Foul Flame Blast for the Flame Hand, or Arc Ball Lightning for Storm Hand. Spark also works for the Storm Hand, but I think it's a little bit less consistent than Arc, right? And obviously if you get them with Anger or Wrath, that's great. That's really the only thing that I had changed for the mercenary in my notes section here. As far as like the actual stuff that I changed for leveling, nothing's really changed here for the notes, right? I also added this part right here about finding one. You can just farm the control blocks in Act 10 until you have a combatant or a many shot. I don't think you'd be that lucky, but who knows? Maybe if you're dedicated enough and you're going to farm that for like 5 hours, maybe you'll just get one. So as far as the gems goes, again, I changed this to Destructive Link. I changed all my auras to be in the body armor, and then I changed the links to reflect what I have in the notes section. I also went ahead and I kept the Victoria's influence for the generosity and reservation efficiency early game, and then I have the Allgaier here. Ungo's Harmony, I put it in here. This doesn't have an Anoint in it, and there's a Center of Benevolence, and then there's just the gear that I would just say like what I'd be focusing on. Not a whole lot's really changed in the leveling POB, but this is like I'm setting up for, at least myself, what I'm focusing on and what my progress should feel like as I go from level 1 to level 90, 95. I also grabbed some crit nodes here so that there is a bit more crit chance between myself giving to the mercenary. And the reason I did this is because if I change this to elemental overload, you can see what our base critical strike chance is right here. This is what's going to be given to the mercenary. If I activate a diamond flask, it goes up to 95%. Obviously, if I had a Tripanon, it would be 100% chance. Just as a reminder, Resolute Technique does not actually change anything. All it does is just make it so that you cannot deal critical strikes, but it doesn't change your actual critical strike chance. That's why it's not that big of a deal to have Resolute Technique. It effectively is just giving the critical strike chance to the mercenary and nothing else. As far as the tree goes, not a whole lot's really even changed here, to be honest with you, in the late game, right? We're still going to be doing KF. We're still going to be grabbing Chester Bond, grabbing Empower Bonds. Nothing too crazy here. All that being said, this is going to be the ES swap that I'm going to be trying to make work again. I was able to achieve this on day 3 or 4, right? And honestly, it only took that long because I didn't really understand what I was going for. So if I kind of knew what I was going for, I would have already probably had this achieved on day 2 or day 3. Probably not this part, right? Or maybe even had like a Syntrek with corruptions for +2 socketed AoE gems or aura gems. I can't remember what that corruption is, right? But these are like really cheap boots. Like you can just corrupt a whole bunch of these. This is obviously vestigialed. This would be ideal. This is a vestigialed from a March of the Legion. March of the Legion gives this +3 to a level of socket aura gems, and the reason that's good is because it is going with my smite. I have the Spectre stuff in. I have the auras changed. Mid game, I'd be looking to get at least 2 enlightens, right? Because I'm trying to fit a whole bunch of auras in at this point. I kind of had to sack levels for vitality and for precision, but again, if I'm using an attack-based mercenary, I'm gonna give him gear with a good amount of accuracy. I think you need around like 500 to like 800 flat accuracy, especially because we're giving them precision, and they also have built-in a pretty large accuracy modifier in their own character stat sheet, so it shouldn't even be that hard to make them actually hit things. And I'm using the Stormblast Mine with Assassin's Mark this time. Assassin's Mark, I think, does interact with the critical strike chance, and if it does, it's really easy to cap crit for us because it basically gives us 1.5 base critical strike chance. I don't know for sure, but I think because it's a curse where enemies just have this extra chance to be critically striked, it interacts with both you and the mercenary. Not 100% sure on that though, but I have seen people confirming that it does. So could be wrong on that. I hope I'm not, because if I am not, it's like 95% chance to crit with Flask on. If I am right, then it is, I think, your capped crits. All that to be said, this is what I'd be going for. The gear is very similar to the POB that I had showed off already on my day, I think it was my day 5 POB. This is what I'd be going for the Forbidden Flesh and Flame. I think the champion Forbidden Flesh and Flame is more damage, right? If I wanted to like min-max like damage, like this is definitely more damage because you also intimidate enemies and then you can fortify, right? Which is really good. And then the enemies that you intimidate or taunt rather take 10% increased damage. So this is just champion, I think, is way better for like raw damage, plus you get increased aura of effect. Like if you're min maxing damage, a champion Forbidden Flesh and Flame is like the best thing. I was going for efficiency and tankiness because I just wanted to be tankier in general so that I had a better time playing. This is why eventually I did get to the point where I became a lot tankier and was able to like tank a whole bunch of uber boss slams and whatnot. Not saying it's the tankiest build, but like eventually it got to the point where I was actually like very tanky once I had a lot more evasion and armor started stacking with my auras, right? So Guardian was really nice. This is one that's really comfy. It also gives you a bunch of reservation efficiency, which just feels really, really good. And then also here, I'm still getting the Thread of Hope. Nothing's really changed here on that front. Divine Shield with Glancing Bows, right? It's just now that I'm going for the critical strike chance, I have Champion of the Cause allocated. I think this feels way better than the previous setup I was going for before in life stacking. And I think at this point I started to try and work my way over to Light of Meeting setup alongside a Unnatural Instinct. In my last update, I had started working on getting all that set up, right? I didn't include this in the last video, but I had gotten tattoos for increased maximum energy shield, right? This pushed me up to about 9.3k. There was some things that changed here, I believe, and I think it was literally just like changing this to Champion of the Cause. But yeah, even this has the Grace has 25% increase aura of effect, right? Obviously, in comparison to a Jinx Juju, I'm losing a good bit of tankiness, not, you know, running this instead. But I mean, this just feels way too good. The critical strike chance that I'm giving to this guy is insane. If I had Mage Blood, I'd be able to go back to using Jinx Juju and instead just using the Mage Blood to just make myself obnoxiously tankier, right? That was an option. I probably won't do that, but like I said before, here's the Light of Meaning. Here is the Unnatural Instinct, right? All this stuff is just giving me a bunch of ES and a bunch of tanky stats. Still have the clusters here from the last thing. Nothing's really changed here outside of the one that I mentioned in the previous video. Just in general, this is giving me so much more stats and it's making my character feel way tankier. This is what I prefer to get to. By the time I got here, I was again farming Uber bosses. I was doing Simulacrum with very little issues. I was still able to make upgrades and even get much tankier if I really wanted to, or even go for more damage if I really wanted to. But when I got to this point, I was just content. I was happy. I didn't even use a good kinetic blast mercenary. Honestly, I wasn't even using like hyper min-maxed mercenaries in general. My most expensive mercenary was like 25 divine at the baseline, and I could have had a better single target setup with a combatant if I actually set that up instead. So that's kind of what I'm going to be aiming for. I think leveling this build is going to be pretty much similar, if not the same, but like the actual gameplay should feel a lot smoother instead focusing on the crit setup. Once I am kind of at the point where I have all of my unique items set up in the early game, I'm probably just going to be cruising pretty easily. As far as if this build can be done in SSF, however, I don't want to immediately say that it's recommended, right? I'd say it can probably be played there and be effective at farming, but it has a lot of unique items to even make work in the first place, especially when you get to the late game. Allgyre is required. Ungeo's Harmony is required. Aegis Aurora makes you just feel so much more tanky as you scale into the late game. Sanctuary Benevolence is required, right? We're not even going to talk about the fact that I'm having a Natural Instinct in it and a Light of Meaning. It's probably playable, but it's hard to recommend it. I think a Flame Link setup, even like a low budget one, would probably fare a bit better. But at minimum, you need to have a Merc with Marilyn's Fallacy. You need to have the Unjil's Harmony. You need to have Auguire or a Tripanon in the early game at the very least to even start making the build work with Destructive Link. Destructive Link requires these items because it needs to be capped crit for your character or close to capped crit for your character, and relies on giving that capped crit to your mercenary with a large amount of critical strike multiplier. Not something I'd highly recommend as a first character. Maybe as a second character when you have some more uniques and you farm a bit more, it's a great character, but that's just my personal opinion. Obviously, we all know that mercenaries get extremely overpowered as you get more money and start throwing a whole bunch of more money at them, right? As Lance has already showed off, he has cleared the hardest Valdo's map that has like a 2.8 or 2.1 billion DPS requirement or something ridiculous, with like mirrors of gear being thrown at it, right? So obviously mercs are clearly very strong. We'll see if they survive into the next league. We'll find out. A video I wanted to make that kind of just goes over my setup that I kind of just wanted to lay out on paper for not only myself, but kind of just like as a reference point for future videos. If I plan to keep updating this build, I'm just going to link all the POBs in the description when I go through all this. Everything here felt good while leveling. I didn't have a single complaint going through any of this. I think the only complaint I had was that at the beginning, we didn't know anything about mercs. I think that this will, at least for me personally, be successful again. There's probably some things I can iterate on and change, but if I do, it will go in another video. And hopefully I can keep league starting this every league. So all that to be said, thank you for watching. I hope the league has been great for you. I'm kind of been checked out of the league at this point. I've been mostly not playing. I've been enjoying other games, to be completely honest with you, and just kind of giving myself a little bit of a break because I've been playing Path of Exile's leagues, the last 3 leagues back to back to back non-stop for the last like 6 months. And I could use a break. All that being said, thank you for watching. I appreciate the amazing reception I've gotten from the previous videos. Like, it's actually been crazy seeing all the people being really happy about the build and supportive. I was like, honestly, completely shocked at how many people watched. It was pretty surreal to me. It was very overwhelming, to be honest with you, but it was awesome either way. So once again, thank you for watching. You have a great rest of the league, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.